Did you ever become involved in criminal activity in New London, Connecticut? Yes, sir. How did you get involved in that? Around that time, they had drugs in New London, Connecticut. Generally, who is they? It was T-Rock, Top, Mark, Bush. And did they ask you to do something in connection with those drugs? Yes, there was a kid by the name of Sean at the time that was hustling out there, and they had got a call from a young lady whose house they were using at that particular time, who informed them that some individuals from that neighborhood had started frequenting her apartment and selling drugs there. Did they ask you to go up and essentially be muscle in that situation? Yes. And did you go? Yes, I did. Were you arrested when you were there? Yes. Did the police end up getting called to the house that Sean was at? Yes. And you were arrested for what crime? They arrested me for trespassing. And in fact, though, what else were you in possession of at that time or right before the police arrested you? I was in possession of a firearm and drugs. And that would be crack cocaine, is that right? Yes. But you didn't get caught for that, right? No. Did you maintain your status on bail that you had from this case that we had talked about, the drug case, 1989? Yes. Okay, and later on that year, in June of 1989, were you arrested again? Yes. For a crime involving a police officer? Yes. What was that? After I came from New London, Connecticut, being that the drugs and the money had got caught, I came back and I explained to the guys that I showed them the pink slip from when I went through the system. So I explained to them that I didn't have the money, I didn't have the drugs. They said it was all right, we will work something out, and that we were going to have to do something to replace those funds to get the work back. Okay, when you showed them the pink slip, what was the purpose of doing that? To let them know that I actually got arrested. I didn't know if they believed me or not. It wasn't like they were pressing me. I wanted to show it to them. Instead of stealing the drugs? Yes. So what did you end up trying to do to get this money back? Well, while we were standing there trying to hatch a plan to come up with some money, because when I got caught in New London, Connecticut, it basically depleted all the funds that we had at that particular time. And I remember we were standing there and some guys walked past. Sorry to interrupt you, but you were standing where? On the side of 433? In Lafayette Gardens? Yes, sir. And what happened? And about 3 guys walked past and they had on some jewelry, and we decided that that would be a start. And so did you try and were you going to rob those people? Yes, sir. And what happened when you were going to rob them? I followed them up the block from Lafayette and Franklin. By the time we got to Lafayette and Clawson, I think they realized that I was going to attempt to rob them. So what they did was when they got to the corner of Lafayette and Clawson, they started running. I'm just going to put the map back on for the jury's reference. Lafayette and Clawson? Yes. So go ahead. So they started running, and I realized that I had been duped, basically. So I turned back around and started walking standard 433 again. What did you mean by being duped? I realized they knew I was going to rob them, and they were biding their time to get further enough away from me so that when they started running, I wouldn't be able to catch up with them. And when you turned around, did you walk back towards 433? Yes, sir. And what did you see when you did that? Well, I was walking, and then I was talking to a young kid by the name of Kimmy. He was on the side of me with the bike, and it was because of him I noticed there was a car in the street trailing me. So I'm looking at the car. The car was looking at me, and I realized that it was officers inside the car, so I started running. And you didn't realize it right away. Why? Were they uniformed officers in a police car? No, they were plain clothes. So you started running, and what happened when you ran? I started running, and as I'm running towards 433, the individuals that I had been with saw me running and assumed that the guys who I went to rob was chasing me and started firing. At the police officers? Yes. And you were eventually arrested for that, is that correct? Yes. And charged with attempted murder of the police officers? Yes, sir. So you had 2 cases pending in Brooklyn State Court at that point, is that right? Yes. You had the drug charge and attempted murder, and what ended up happening? The attempted murder was dismissed, but the robbery I pled guilty to. Okay, and what was the robbery? At a clothing store, a known style clothing store. So you were arrested again, is that right? Yes. And what were you doing during that occasion? I was with some females who were boosting around that time, and they used to pay me to come with them to stores while they boost. My job was basically, if they were to get caught and a security guard would try to detain them, I would stop the security guard. So you were to fight with the security guard? Yes. And you were arrested on one occasion while that was happening? Yes. So what did you actually plead guilty to? Robbery. What sentence did you get? 2 to 4. And do you recall, that was in 1989, correct? No, that was when I pled guilty to the drugs. When I pled guilty to the robbery, it was in 93. All right, so let's start with you pled guilty to the drugs. And did you do some time in jail? Yes. And did you get out towards the end of 1991? Yes, sir. When you came home, did you see Wise? Yes. Do you remember what he was doing at that time? The normal thing that he had been doing, selling drugs. And during this time, did you see World at all? Yes. Can you explain the context that you saw World? When I came home, I was hearing a lot about these different factions that were being established in the projects. When I went to prison, it was more so like the guys who had the money to purchase cocaine and turn it into cocaine crack, or basically just selling crack. Now, when I came home, it was more so of crews. So what were some of the crews that you saw in Lafayette Gardens at that time? It was a few. It was CMB, Cock, and Squeeze. It was some guys who used to call themselves the Deuces. And you said CMB. Who were some of the people associated with CMB at that time? Wise, World, Popsy, eBay, Trug, Boo, Hastings. I'm going to show you what's been marked as government exhibit. Well, first, let me ask you, CMB, do you know what that stands for? Cash Money Brothers. Do you know where that name came from? I was in prison when they adopted that name, but I got the knowledge that it came from a movie. First, I'm going to show you Government Exhibit 5 in evidence. Ask you if you recognize that person? Yes, sir. Who is that? That's Boo. And do you recall what Boo's relationship was with World during that time? I knew World and Boo was being real close friends. Okay, next I'm going to show you Government Exhibit 2, which I know you've already identified, but eBay. And how did you meet eBay? 1989. It was a girl by the name of Catrice. She was well known in the projects. She got into an argument with a female, and she wanted to have a fight with this particular girl, but someone was stopping her from having the fight with this girl, so she came and she got us. When we went to us, who is us? It was me, Wise. I just remember Wise being present. Other people, their names are not coming to me at this point. So what happened? We went to the apartment, and the apartment had been the apartment where Robert Footman lives. And when we knocked on the door, eBay and Trug answered the door. So we told them what was going on, and they explained that the girl had been there with them. And they basically stood up and said that they wasn't going to throw the girl out to the wolves. So that's how you met eBay? Yes. Now, do you know if there were any other people that you said you mentioned Popsy? Is that correct? Yes, sir. And first I'm going to show you what's been marked Government Exhibit 8. It's in evidence. Who is that? That's Trug. And how about Government Exhibit 24? Stack. 7? Popsy. 35. Diesel. Were those people you mentioned as spending time with World at that time? Yes, sir. I'm just going to show you one more. 56. Who is that? Portal. Who did he hang out with? World. Were there some people who hung out more with Wise as opposed to the people I just mentioned to you about World? Well, most of those individuals were close in age to World. Wise knew all of those individuals, but all of those guys were more so of the people that World hung out with, basically. Who hung out with Wise then? Who were the older guys? Another guy named Shy. Can you describe what the situation was with respect to drug dealing at that time in Lafayette Gardens? Which time? Around 1991, when you came home from your drug charge. When I came home, it was a lot of different individuals, like I said, selling drugs. You even had guys coming from as far as Grand and Clifton. Who was the guy who came from Grand and Clifton that you remember? I remember Rab and Slink and those guys coming to the projects a lot. Okay, now on February 21st of 1992, were you arrested? Yes. That was the robbery then? Yes. With the boost thing, is that right? Yes. Did you end up pleading guilty in that case? Yes, sir. What was your sentence? 2 to 4. Now, did you go to jail immediately in February of 1992? No. Do you remember when you pled guilty? Closer towards the end of the year. All right, so I want to take you to between February of 92 and when you went to jail the next time. What were you doing? Around that time, I think I was doing robberies. Okay, and in fact, you were on bail, correct, for your robbery case, so you weren't supposed to be committing crimes, correct? Yes. Do you remember what your situation was with drug dealing in the project then after your arrest? I remember it being kind of a situation where you had basically dudes from different buildings who would govern their building. Okay, so as a friend of Wise, did you ever get involved in anything that World was doing? At that time? Yeah. Little things, but not like... What kind of little things? I mean, there were, times we would go different places and get into altercations with people, but it wasn't as if I was one of the workers. Did you know someone named Crazy Troy? Yes, sir. Who was that? It was a guy from the neighborhood who I met probably the first 2 or 3 years I moved around there. Had a serious reputation for using angel dust. Okay, at some point towards the end of 1992, do you recall what he was doing? Yes. What was that? He was selling heroin. Do you know if he was affiliated with anybody? I don't know who he was affiliated with as far as his business dealings, but I knew that he was close friends with JR. JR who? Hamilton. Did anything happen to Crazy Troy at the end of 2002? Yes, sir. What happened? He was murdered. Can you explain, were you nearby when he was murdered? Yes, sir. Did you actually see him being murdered? Yes. Earlier that day, can you explain what you were doing? I came outside. All that week there's a small park in the back of the apartments. I used to go out in the park and work out. I'm just going to show you 101. Can you show the jury where you used to go work out? This park right here. Okay, and continue then. And you said he used to, is that Troy? Yes, sir. He used to what? He used to be in that small park right there selling heroin. And so go ahead. So I met up with him a couple times and we struck up conversations, and being that I had knew him prior to that, he didn't speak with a lot of people because of the reputation he had from being a little off. So me and him was having a lot of conversations, and he was, telling me that he was basically getting his life together and he was finally off the drugs and he was trying to, just get some money. While I was standing there talking to him, an individual by the name of Eric Walters approached and called me over and asked me what I was doing with him. And I told him, I said, we just talking. We just chilling. Why? What's up? And he said, you need to stay away from him because he got a hit on him. And asked him who. And he told me about World and Wise. So what happened after that? Well, being that I was friends with Wise, I told Eric to go speak with them and let them know that I knew the dude and I didn't think that he was going to be a problem, and I was going to try to find out what was going on. Okay, what happened after that? Eric had explained to me that, Your Honor, could we have a foundation for who Eric is? Sure. Ask him further questions. How did you know Eric? He lived in the building on the 6th floor. Did you know what his relationship was with Wise? He was one of the individuals in the projects that was basically trying to be a part of the drug dealing. Okay, what do you mean by that, trying to be a part of the drug dealing? He was a school kid, a basketball player looking to make extra money, and he was just dabbling in selling drugs. So he was selling drugs, is that right? Yes. Who is he selling for, if you know? Wise. So what, if anything, did he tell you? I asked him what did it have to do with, why was he being targeted, what happened, and he explained that it had something to do with him and his affiliation with JR. Okay, so what did you do after that? Well, I told Eric, I said I talked to Dude all the time. I don't know if he f***ed with them like that. He just knew him. Everybody knew him. Let me speak to the dude and find out what's going on. Okay, and so what happened? So he basically told me that he was going to go let World and them know that I said the guy was good money. When I say good money, I mean he was cool. Excuse me. And we walked off, and I'm thinking that I'm having the situation under control. I'm telling Troy, I said, listen, I don't know what's going on, but your name is being mixed up in something, but I'm going to try to get it straight. So were you ever with Troy then later that day? Yes, sir. Where were you? We walked from the projects to his apartment on Bedford Avenue. What did you see there? When we got there? Yeah, what did you see happen? When we got to the apartment, he was asking me a lot of questions about who was it that he may be in danger with. I didn't really want to say any names because I wasn't totally sure what was going on. And like I said, I thought I had the situation under control because these were guys that I knew well. And me putting my name to it, I figured I was going to quell any kind of violence that would occur. But at that particular time, he was just saying that he was going to make sure that he was safe. And I didn't actually see him, but it was my impression that he... Let me stop there. Did you stay in the apartment with him or did you leave? We left together. You left together. And do you know where Troy went? We started walking back up the block towards the projects. Okay, and did you see anybody that you knew at that time? It was a lot of people standing on the corner. Let me ask you this. Did you ever talk to World about Crazy Troy? Yes, I did. Can you describe that? Is this on the day Troy died? This was minutes before it happened. And what was the conversation you had? I'm coming up the block with Troy, and on the corner of DeKalb and Kent Avenue, there's a phone booth. Do you see that on the map here? It's probably like right here in this area. So the corner of... A little over right here on the corner of Kent. Kent, which is a small street? Yes. Okay, and there was what was near the phone booth? Was there any kind of business establishment? There's a store directly on the corner, but there's also a house that we used to frequent, the steps in front of this phone booth. So where did you see World? I didn't actually see him. Okay, what happened? There was a couple of guys standing out there, and we walked up, and they was like, yo, World want to holler at you. What happened after that? I got on the telephone with him. Who did you recognize the person on the other end of the line to be? World. And what happened? He asked me what I was doing with Troy. What did you say? I explained to him that I was just talking to him. I heard about what was going on, but I didn't think that he had anything to do with what he was assuming. He said to me, dude's a live wire. He's a little bugged out, and that if I was putting my name on this, if something was to happen to somebody, I would be held responsible. And did anything else happen in that conversation? We agreed that everything was cool. I told him that I knew for a fact that Troy wasn't trying to get involved in any existing beef that was going on, and he said okay. At that time, he asked me to go with an individual by the name of Phil to bag up some drugs. Okay, and that's Phil, Phil? Yes, sir. And did you know who he was talking about when he said Phil? Yes. And what did you know about Phil and his role as far as drug dealing with World? He was a young kid in the projects that would make money by performing the tedious task of putting the crack cocaine into the vials. Okay, and I'm going to show you what's been marked as Government Exhibit 40 for... It's in evidence. Sorry, do you know who that is? Yes, sir. Who is that? That's Phil. And you said Phil would package for World, is that right? Yes, sir. And World, you said, asked you to watch Phil? Yes. Did he say why he wanted you to do that? Well, it was known at the time that some of these individuals who would be delegated to package the crack cocaine would sometimes stash, so I... What do you mean by stash? Well, take some of the crack cocaine and hide it and keep it to themselves. Steal it? Yes, sir. So what was your understanding about Phil then? That he needs to be watched. And so what did you do? I told him all right. We waited for a few minutes. Phil came walking through the middle of the projects. He told me he had what he needed. We proceeded. Well, I said bye to everybody there, shook everybody's hands or whatever. I'm sorry, when you say there, where? At the phone booth. At the phone booth? Yes. Okay. And we proceeded across the street, walked into 456. All right, so again, this is where you identified as 456, is that right? Yes, sir. What happened when you went into 456? We went into the building. We were there for a short duration of time or waiting for the elevator. When it came, we got in the elevator. As the doors were closing, I heard gunfire. And what did you do when you heard the gunfire? Immediately, I thought that Troy had probably decided to make a move, and I'm thinking to myself, I've done something wrong because I put my word on it that this guy was not trying to get involved with anybody else's conflict. And I pressed the door open and walked out of the elevator and started to go towards the door. As I'm getting towards the door in the lobby of 456, the front is basically glass, so I get to the glass and I can see across the street. Okay, what did you see across the street? I see Troy on the floor and eBay over him firing a weapon. Firing a gun? Yes, sir. And where was Troy across the street? Next to the phone booth. What did you do when you saw that? Basically turned around and walked back and got on the elevator and went up to the apartment that I was supposed to be going to and went to establish my alibi. When you say you went to establish your alibi, what do you mean by that? I wanted, if anybody, I didn't want it to be known that I was present or even on the scene. Were you eventually arrested for murdering Troy? Yes. And were you taken to jail? Yes, sir. Did you sit in what's called a lineup? Yes. And how long did you stay in jail for? For about a week and a half. What happened to the case? It was dismissed. Now, during that time before the dismissal of that case, did you talk to anybody in terms of helping out your case? Yes. Who did you talk to? The young lady whose house we was at when me and Phil went to bag up the drugs. Was this a woman whose apartment was used for this purpose just once or other times? That was probably like the third time we used her apartment. And what did you ask this woman to do, if anything, for you? We explained to her what happened. She heard the shots, and I basically told her that if anybody asked when the shots were fired, and we heard the shots being fired, I was there at her house. We was all in the house. Now, and eventually you were released, is that right? Yes. Do you know if you were ever indicted for that? No, I wasn't. You were not indicted? No. In terms of your being arrested for this murder, how, if at all, did it affect your relationship with eBay? Our relationship at the time was strained because me and him didn't have a very strong rapport with one another. He didn't really know me, and his thing, he was very aggressive towards some individuals in my family. So did you eventually reconcile with eBay? Yes. Do you remember approximately what year that was? It was in '98.